Hello everyone, welcome again to another Teacher Joseph podcast. Well, today I'm inside a coffee shop and I thought we would talk about some verbs which you would use here. One of the main ones is to steam, because of course that's what they do with the milk, isn't it? They get a little metal jug of milk and they put it under a machine and it makes a noise and you can see the steam coming out of it. So the verb to steam would be very common. Another one, of course, is brew, because as you know, we make coffee and tea, but some people like to use the word brew, and that's also a very popular idiom, you know. Oh, there's trouble brewing, for example, is something that we say a lot, as tea is a very big part of our culture. And not only tea, but tea and coffee these days. As I've mentioned before, when I was a little boy, we didn't really have coffee shops here. We had tea rooms, and my grandparents were members of the Anti-Coffee League, and they used to march through the streets protesting against the sale of coffee because they thought it was a drug. Now, of course, those days have all gone, and I think those days had pretty much gone by the time I came along in the 1970s, but there are still some people here who would be very against coffee, particularly those from certain Christian denominations, yes. So anyway, I got up early this morning and I had to get my hair cut, because those of you who've seen me, you probably know that I only have hair on the sides. So I was beginning to look a little bit like Albert Einstein, or you could say the grandfather from the TV show The Munsters. So I had to go to the barber and get my hair cut. And these barbers were North African. As I've told you before, generally speaking, when you go to the barber here in the UK, you'll be lucky if you get someone who's completely English. Usually it's someone who has a mixture of blood in them, maybe half Mediterranean or half British, or completely North African or Arab or Turkish. So today I went to the barber on my street, which has the North African people. And now I'm inside a coffee shop. So let me just continue telling you about coffee. So we just did the verb to steam. And the next verb is to pour. Of course, that's what they do with the milk. After they've steamed it, they pour it into the coffee, don't they? Or into the coffee cup. We also pour tea. In fact, we pour any liquid, as well as pouring liquid. This is another idiom. When anyone is in any trouble or has some bad luck, we can say, oh, it never rains, but it pours. And to describe the weather, oh, it's pouring with rain today. Pouring with rain, not of rain. Okay, so pour. This is very common. I'm just watching people moving outside this coffee shop, because I'm sitting next to the door, and it's quite alarming. I'll tell you why. Because here everyone looks the same. My family have lived in this area for quite literally hundreds of years, and therefore it's fairly normal to come face to face with someone who looks the same as I do. But passing by the window, or passing by the glass door, was a woman who looked exactly like my mother. And I'm thinking, oh, that's really scary. That woman looks exactly like my mother, but my mother's been dead for many years. Now, many people might see that as a superstition, or as an omen for the future. But for me, it's not, because this thing happens all the time. I see people that look exactly the same as I do, but we don't know who they are. They may be cousins, half cousins, or maybe somewhere back in my family line. They fit in somewhere in my genealogy. So yeah, a little bit worrying though when that happens, when you come face to face with someone who's the double of a relative. It doesn't really concern me though, because even if I did speak to the person, within a few seconds probably I would realize it's only in the face do they look alike, but not when you start talking to them. But I was just distracted there. The other reason why I'm quite distracted is because when I was at the barber, they said, "Do you want your ears and nose done?" I said yes, expecting them to simply shave them. But they actually lit these matches or flames, I don't know what they were, cooled them and then shoved them in my nose and the ears. A little bit painful, a little bit sore, but it worked. But I can still feel them tingling, and that's also on my mind right now. Speaking of being on my mind, another thing I wanted to tell you today is about the pop group Boney M. Now, we all know Boney M. You would have to be living far, far away if you haven't heard of the pop group Boney M. They sang those lovely songs like Rasputin and many others, Rivers of Babylon, Brown Girl, In the Ring. The list is endless. Anyway, the lead singer of Boney M, her name is Liz Mitchell. She's the one with the absolutely beautiful voice, especially if you think of songs like Daddy Cool or Ma Baker. And anyway, I've been reading that she's broken her arm. And the reason why she's broken her arm is because she crashed her car. But while she was telling this story, that she's broken her arm and crashed her car, we discover from her words that her brother is actually in prison. Now, she's a Caribbean woman, as I'm sure you know. If you know Boney M, it's basically a black group. So they're all, I think, Afro-Caribbean. So Liz Mitchell, the one with the beautiful voice, she tells us that she broke her arm driving her car, but she was going to visit her brother who's in prison when she crashed. And she says she thought she was going to die. Now, that story is a very interesting story, and thankfully she's not dead. But the other thing about this story is that her brother is in prison on terrorism charges. Yeah, it seems that he converted to another religion, and he got involved in some kind of serious criminal activity involving terrorism, and he's been placed in prison here, which made headline news. I mean, I think he tried to blow a place up. To blow up, of course, is to destroy. So he ended up in prison. And to think that's Liz Mitchell's brother. We often say to think when we get surprised. Oh, imagine. Oh, to think. You see, so it's an expression that we often use. To think or imagine. Like, for example, if, let's just say as an example, I appear on Skype one day during your English lesson dressed as Mickey Mouse. Yeah, or Little Red Riding Hood. That would be funnier. With a basket over my arm, distributing apples to little children. You could say, oh, imagine Teacher Joseph doing that, or to think my English teacher did something like that. And there we are. So that's the story of Liz Mitchell and her brother. I can't remember his name. I think he had changed it anyway. I think his Islamic name is Rashid. I don't remember. But anyway, a very interesting story about how she broke her arm. But I mean, her music is wonderful. I really like the music of Boney M. And it's very sad, of course, that they don't make music these days. Or maybe they still do. I know that Liz still sings. She's a really incredibly wonderful woman. So, very nice person. I just love her voice completely. Right, so getting back to these verbs of the coffee shop. So we mentioned steam, and we also mentioned the verb to pour. And speaking of pour, I've heard a weather forecast for today that it's going to be pouring of rain later. And behind me, by the counter in this coffee shop, I can hear lots of people, lots of baristas pouring milk and pouring coffee for the customers. Now, the other thing I need to do today is just to describe this coffee shop for you and to describe the view outside, just to give you a kind of idea of exactly where I am and what it sounds like and what it looks like. And let's do that now. Okay, so basically I'm in this coffee shop. The color scheme is light brown and green. So all around me I can see tables and chairs which are brown, and I can also see the walls are brown, and so is the roof. Like many of these coffee shops, it's completely new and fabricated. Rather than making use of old buildings, this is more or less like a shed or some kind of fabricated building that's been designed purely to accommodate a small coffee shop. I'd say a shed, but it's also quite luxurious and incredibly modern looking. So it's not actually in any way downtrodden. The roof is incredibly open. I mean, I can see the rafters, which are nice, attached to the rafters. So there isn't actually, a proper ceiling. I'm just looking straight up at the wooden roof. And attached to it is a huge air conditioning system, pipes running along it, metal rafters, and of course the fire alarm system. The air conditioning system is blowing out hot air, and of course the speakers attached to these pipes running along the top, which are I think metal. And these speakers are broadcasting music, and I kind of get the feeling that this music is being broadcast centrally across all of their branches. I don't think it's local, and I say that because it's not radio, it's something else, and I don't see any controls for it here at all. With these very large chains, everything is streamlined. On the walls, there's patterns which are kind of meaningless, they look symmetrical. They may be associated with Native American Indians from North America and Canada. I don't know that they are designs, but this is an American coffee chain, that is possible. Or they might just be modern art. It's very hard to say. Because there's a lot of glass around here, I can see outside, and that's very, very grey in contrast to the bright light brown that I'm looking at, okay? So that's a general description of the interior, and then one side basically of this coffee shop is full of the baristas and coffee. Now, if I was in an exam, of course, I wouldn't be describing things that way. I would have to make sure that I'm using more than just the present tense. So I would have to be comparing and contrasting. This coffee shop reminds me of North America and the time I traveled there. I would also have to be talking about maybe an experience in the coffee shop. And unlike outside, for example, inside is comfortable. Unlike outside, which looks cold and grey, reminding me of perhaps some kind of sea or ocean. Some kind of sea or ocean scene where you would expect to see a little otter or penguin wandering along. Now, I'm nowhere near the beach, but with the grey sky, I can see easily how I could be reminded of that scene. For me personally, I could say something like, the glass windows remind me of a scene from one of my favourite pop videos, which is called On My Own by Patti LaBelle and Michael McDonald. There's a scene in there where she's standing at the window in a kind of glass room looking out at everything around her, and that's what I'm reminded of, that song by Patti LaBelle and Michael McDonald, On My Own. So you see, in an exam, these are the kind of things you want to bring in. Memories, things that you've done in the past. You can't just idly describe things with the present tense. You need more. You also can bring in, the past tense or the future. I will bring my grandmother here next time she visits. So there we are. Well, that's it from me for today. I think I've spoken for long enough. I hope you've enjoyed this and not been too distracted by the noises around me. Okay, so I'll see you all soon. Have a wonderful day. Bye.